When you have people coming from different generations or backgrounds and experiences, it's easy for decision-making to feel personal. But when you root decisions in shared values, not just opinions, right? I had found that it creates alignment. It gives the team a way to move forward, even when we disagree.
While values might differ or strengths might differ, the mission always unites us, right? What does the community need, not what I need or you need.
Welcome to Nonprofits Now, Leading Today, a new podcast that gives nonprofit leaders a playbook to tackle today's most pressing leadership challenges. I'm so excited to host a conversation today about a problem that perplexes many of us, dealing with all of the generations that we have in the workforce. In some cases, we have 4 different generations all working side by side, and sometimes that's wonderful, but oftentimes it's tough. And I am turning to 2 experts today to talk about how they've handled this situation well. Alex, your organization's model really depends on this intergenerational grouping, and it's very intentional. But I imagine you still have some challenges. What are some of the things that you have faced in your organization as you've worked with the different generations? Could you identify what some of those challenges are?
Having an intergenerational team isn't just something that happens. It's something we intentionally design because it's critical to how we meet our mission. And so we hire near-peer coaches, many of whom have just graduated from college themselves. And so they're living proof that success is possible. They bring urgency, they bring empathy, and a deep understanding of the obstacles that our students face because they've recently navigated them too. We have the experience, obviously, of professionals who have been on our team for quite some time, and they bring institutional memory, they bring, tech and education and operations savvy, and a long-range view of systems, right? And so for us, we really believe that when you blend those perspectives, proximity and wisdom, you can create an organization that can be innovative and grounded and empathetic and effective. One of the biggest challenges for us is navigating just different expectations about how we work. So for example, during the pandemic, we moved to a fully remote model, just like many organizations. And over time, we realized that some of our younger staff, especially our near-peer coaches, wanted to be back in person. They were craving that mentorship, the proverbial hallway conversations, the chance to learn by watching others. But at the same time, some of our more experienced team members had built a rhythm that worked for them remotely, and they weren't eager to return to a traditional office setting. And so that tension taught us that we can't take a one-size-fits-all approach, and we had to get clear on what needed to be in person versus what could flex, and then communicate the why behind those decisions.
What makes it work for an organization? What helps you as a leader? Are there certain things that you really can see that benefit of the blending of the generations?
Yeah, I think for me, what makes it work well is that intergenerational teams force you to think differently. They disrupt groupthink. They bring perspectives to the table that you might not even realize you're missing, So one of my favorite examples of this came from our coaching team. Our first student-facing tool was a Facebook app, to remind students of key activities and deadlines. We were so enamored with the tool and thought it was a game changer. And we couldn't understand why students weren't using the app. We started hearing from our near-peer coaches that they and our students were no longer on Facebook. It had become an app for their parents and their aunties, So our students were becoming mobile only or mobile first. And because they were closer to our students' lived experiences, they caught something that the rest of us missed. We made the change immediately and created a mobile app instead that we're still using today. But that's just one example, and it happens constantly. Our younger staff often bring fresh thinking, new tools, a sense of what's happening right now with students, and our more seasoned staff, like myself, can help shape those insights into long-term strategies, help us avoid pitfalls that we've seen before, and ensure that we're building in a way that's sustainable. And for me, that creates a healthy tension.
It does. That's so essential to every team. I'm thrilled to hear about that. Elsa, you've experienced challenges in your organization. I think you identified them as soon as you joined the organization, that there were frictions between the generations that you have on your staff. Can you talk about what you encountered and describe it a little bit?
We're all learning, right? Alex, thank you so much for sharing your insight. I'm already taking notes on a couple of things. And yeah, so I've been executive director for a year and 4 months now at Emilio Nares Foundation. And when I came into an organization that ran on love and passion around serving families and making sure that children had life-saving treatment. So that meant that a lot of the staff members that we had either were founding staff members, being they were here for 22, 23 years since we existed, basically, when we were founded. A lot of them were parents of children that went through cancer treatment. A lot of them were volunteers that had been here for 15, 17 years. So they had a really true passion for the work. We needed to create new staffing positions to support social media, to support development and all that. And a lot of them were the Gen Zers, right? And a lot of the parents and volunteers and the staff that was very committed were more on the boomer side. So it was just interesting to see that while we had the same mission, we had very different perspectives. And it's an opportunity for us to understand each other and create inclusiveness and making sure that you create the sense of belonging. Each generation brings its own values, its own communication styles, its own strengths, right? So the key is to, as a leader, to be flexible, to be curious, ask the questions, and also be empathetic. So here comes a millennial as executive director. I'm the middle one, right? I'm the middle generation. So how do I build bridges between not only those generations, but even mine? Everybody has different strengths. It's just calling out with a sense of curiosity, what makes us different, but also what is our common goal? And I think calling out the common goal every single time is what's going to keep your team connected. Regardless of the age, the background, it doesn't matter. As long as every single decision that you make is based on how can we better serve the community. But also, I had to call out microaggression. And these microaggressions of talking over people, right? The younger generation didn't feel that they had the space to be innovative and share their opinion because they would get cut off. Those little things, you have to call them out. But to Alex's point, it's also about really stopping groupthink, really making sure that we create this safe space of very clear conversation, of innovation, of we haven't thought about this before, of maybe we've done that in the past, but we can do it in a different way. And creating this safe space of trying and learning together, it's very important in making sure that you always keep the mission at heart. That's it for every single decision. Data and the mission at heart. We want to make sure that everybody feels part of this mission and part of the work and part of the making sure that families feel supported when their child gets diagnosed with cancer. So again, part of it is respecting the institutional knowledge and the experience of the older staff, but also celebrating innovation of the younger staff. Part of it, we started doing a weekly team meeting by highlighting one achievement from, the legacy staff members, and another one by the Gen Zers, the younger generation, and see how they impacted each other and how it impacted the work.
That's great. And so when you're in a staff meeting, do you actually call it out and say, I want to hear from young staff or older staff, or do you just deliberately make sure you're going to turn to somebody who's from the younger generation? How do you make that work without people being self-conscious of, I'm that legacy one?
You don't have to call out the generation, hey, you Gen Z, or hey, you Gen Xer, now you get it, right? You please don't do that. I would not do that, because what if I don't know, right? So no, what I would do it is actually in a very intentional way. So what we started to do in these meetings is create a space for everybody to speak up. So if I would see somebody that was very quiet, normally it was the younger generation because they had respect, right, for those legacy staff members. I would actually call them. I'm like, hey, what do you think about this new perspective or this new program that we're starting? You're really great at social media. How would you see us promoting this service, right? Based on your experience connecting with families, what would you think their response to this program be? So calling out the strengths, calling out what they're an expert in, and making sure that they can bring in their expertise.
Absolutely. Alex, was there anything you wanted to add on that as you were just listening to Elsa?
I mean, it just resonates so deeply. So approaching it with a spirit of curiosity and approaching it with a spirit of respecting what each person brings to the table and also centering the work, right? And not egos. Like those resonated so deeply and palpably with me as a leader and certainly with my experience with our team.
Alex, I know one of the real challenges with managing different generations is the expectations they have about performance management. And that's always a tricky issue. How much feedback should we give? How often? How formalized? And nobody's found a really perfect solution. I'm curious what you have found works using this generational lens.
Oh my goodness, Stacy. So thank you for this question because it's an important one and a hairy one, right? One of the unexpected differences I've observed, especially as we've grown, right, is how different generations experience performance management and feedback. For some of our younger staff, traditional performance reviews can often feel transactional or even punitive. And I've heard, if you trust me, why are you formally evaluating me? Or they'll interpret structured feedback as a sign that something's wrong, right? Rather than as part of how we grow together. And I certainly get that. You know, many of our younger staff have come of age in a world that's questioned traditional hierarchies, that's leaned into transparency and mutual accountability. And what I've experienced is that they value real-time feedback, right? Collaboration and systems that feel human-centered. So when we come in with a more formal process, it can feel out of sync with their expectations. But here's where I try to bridge the gap. I remind our team often that trust and accountability are not opposites. In fact, holding each other to high standards is one of the deepest forms of respect that I can think of. We're fond of saying that feedback is a gift, and we truly mean that, right? And so I have to embody that as a leader, that when you are giving me feedback, that I treat it as a gift. We don't give you feedback because we don't trust you. We give it because we do, because we see your potential and we want to help you grow into it. We also believe that feedback is bi-directional. It has to go both ways. We have to give our younger staff opportunities to give feedback, not just to their managers, but across the organization and even to me as a CEO. So at the same time, we've had to evolve how we approach performance management. We've made our systems more transparent. We train our managers, to focus on coaching, not just evaluation. And we invite our team to co-create their goals and define success for themselves. We emphasize ongoing conversations where feedback is exchanged in all directions, not just once a year check-ins, right? And so feedback happens during one-on-ones that are happening weekly between managers and their employees. It's not just this once a year formal process, right? So I've also learned that respecting someone's experience, whether they're just starting out or have decades under their belt, means listening deeply. And I think this goes back to Elsa's point about curiosity, listening deeply, not assuming intent, and making sure we're creating a culture where everyone feels seen, valued, and challenged to be their best, and not just where some voices of experience in some cases are more valued than others. And so for us, it's been about trying to build a workplace where everyone knows that excellence and empathy go hand in hand and they're not mutually exclusive.
I love that both of you have talked about empathy in this conversation because it's a key ingredient in everything we do, especially given all the challenges every nonprofit's facing today. Elsa, how have you managed on performance? Is there anything else you'd love to talk about that you've seen work?
I love what you mentioned, Alex, about feedback is a gift. It truly is, because what we're trying to do as leaders is to empower new leaders, right? To take on our roles, to take on new exciting career pathways. And you can only accomplish that when somebody else sees your potential and gives you that feedback and says, well, you're doing amazing. Let's try and emphasize this, or you know what? Let's work together. What are the tools even that we can give you as an organization for you to thrive? Because at the end of the day, that's also our goal as an organization. Yes, you come in and help us run the mission, but ideally, I also want to empower you to take on leadership roles that are going to change the landscape. And part of it is having that feedback. I think the only piece that I would love to add is, for us at Emilio Nares Foundation, one of the key things, and I love what you mentioned, Alex, about doing not the once a year performance evaluation, we actually do the same. We set up goals. We have a conversation. What are going to be your goals as a group, as an organization, by department, and individual goals? Because then you can tie in every single activity you have every day to the goals of the organization, and what is your stake in it, right? What is your role in the success of the organization, and how can we make you successful while we're all looking at the same mission? And part of it also is creating feedback loops at every level. The other piece that I would add to that is that we are implementing actually 360 reviews for everyone. So that means that we give the opportunity for not only the manager, but peers to provide feedback, and also those that they supervise. For example, I'm going to be doing a 360 where the staff is going to evaluate me, peers, and partners. The directors are going to be evaluated by their peers, by those who they supervise, but also by myself. So this way we have a really holistic approach to who we are, how we are leading, and also it allows us again to have this gift of feedback so we can continue improving our processes and also be open to opportunities of creating something new together. Because when you create the space for somebody to bring in a new perspective through those type of performance reviews, something's going to spark. It's going to be a catalyst for innovation.
Elsa, I love that. I think one of the things that you just reminded me of as you were talking about this tension between like innovation, right? And then also sort of doing the work. Is to bridge that. We actually brought in an OKR process, right? Like objectives and key results, where you have your run of business goals, right? Like these are the things that we need to do every year to be successful and to uphold the mission and to be responsive to the commitments that we've already made. But OKRs allow us to dream big and to be able to set these ambitious goals that we may not necessarily reach, right? Like part of the OKR process is that you make them challenging enough so that you're not reaching and hitting them at 100% every year. And so we're able to balance both of those, right? Here are a run of business goals that we have to make sure that we hit, but how do we allow ourselves to dream even bigger, to advance the organization, to take risks, right? In ways that they likely wouldn't have if they feared that not reaching those goals would somehow be punitive in a traditional performance evaluation system.
That's such a strong example, and it hits on something I'm grappling with on my own leadership team, and I really appreciate your saying that. One of the things that's come across in this conversation is the focus on mission is what helps you think about, how to bring the generations together, because we're all trying to achieve the same goal. Alex, can you talk a little bit about how you use the organization's values as a way to avoid any of the things that get into the personal dimension that we sometimes see happening in these intergenerational conflicts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's it, right? When you have people coming from different generations or backgrounds and experiences, it's easy for decision making to feel personal. But when you root decisions in shared values, not just opinions, right? I had found that it creates alignment. It gives the team a way to move forward, even when we disagree. And one strategy that's been really effective at Beyond 12 is something we do every year. It's a core values exercise that we've built into our team culture and into our annual team training and planning. So we take real anonymized cases from previous years. We change names to protect the innocent. But moments when we faced tough decisions or internal tensions, and we ask small cross-functional groups to work through them together. So they read the case, They take on different staff roles. And as a small team, they talk through how they would respond, not just based on instinct, but based on data and staying true to our organizational values. And it's been amazing what's come out of those conversations. People start to see the same situation from multiple angles, for instance. They develop more empathy. Here's that word again, for their colleagues. They build a muscle for making hard calls with integrity. And I've also found that it helps bridge generational divides in a really human way. A newer staff member might approach a problem differently than an experienced colleague, but when we ground the conversation in our values, we're not saying one approach is better, but we're asking things like, what would this decision look like if we were truly living our values? And I found that shift from what do I think is right as an individual to what does Beyond 12 stand for has been a game changer for our team, particularly in terms of team cohesion. It builds trust. I think it's creating clarity. It helps everyone feel ownership of our culture, like no matter what their role and their tenure is. So that's just one specific example. And that activity has yielded dividends for our team in terms of cohesion.
That's one I definitely will want to steal from you. Elsa, you talked about the fact that you try to bring teams together on a project so that you've got the generations working together. Is there a specific one that you did that really highlighted the value of that you want to walk us through? How did it happen? How did it work?
Yeah, so in my first year as executive director at Emilio Nares Foundation, I came in with, again, curiosity and learning, right? I wanted to make sure I understood the needs in the community. So we were founded by Richard and Diane Nares. In the need there 23 years ago was transportation to cancer treatment for children. Here in San Diego, our public transportation system is not the best. It takes you 2 to 3 hours to get anywhere. If you're immunocompromised, you cannot be 2-3 hours in public transportation to seek treatment. So that's why an Emilio Nares Foundation was created to provide transportation. The community changes, right? So last year, as we did a community needs assessment, part of the findings were what happens when a child completes treatment? How can we reintegrate them and the family back into everyday life? Leukemia is actually at least 3 years of treatment. So that means they missed school. Probably parents, at least one of them lost their jobs because there's only so many sick days you can take to take your child to treatment. So this impacts the whole family. You need a lot of support around mental health. We said, okay, we're going to create a new program, right? Because this is what the community needs, what they're asking us for. So we brought in everyone from programs, development, everybody, and we started saying, what would this look like? So some people were very much into, well, we've never done this program, right? This type of program. I don't know if we're ready for that. And so the newer generations were the ones that had the positive approach, right? The energy, the innovation, like, well, this is actually an opportunity for us to grow into another space. So the newer generations were pulling those that were very comfortable and then starting to creating this excitement around creating something together. They created a budget together. They designed the program together, and they looked at opportunities and challenges in the landscape in regards to implementing this program. This actually re-energized the whole team. They own this completely. So we re-energized the staff that had been here for years because they learned new things. And the newer staff members or the younger staff members had the opportunity to provide feedback to create something together and bring in an innovative approach.
Yes. And again, another great example of how when you focus on the mission and the values, you can bring these generations together no matter how different their views and their approaches to working are. If you had a single piece of advice for somebody who came to you and said, I just can't stand it. The boomers are warring with the millennials and I don't know what to do. I'm throwing up my hands. I'm wondering what you would say. And I'll start with you, Alex.
Oh, my goodness. Yes. And you've heard threads of this, I think, from this conversation from Elsa and I. But the two things I would say are stay curious. right? And stay grounded. So curious about the people on your team, their lived experiences, their motivations, their working styles, their communications needs. And then, as you just heard from Elsa, and as we talked about, stay grounded in your mission and your values as your North Star. Those for me are the two pieces. And the other thing that I would say is we often think about this as a problem, but I think intergenerational teams are powerful because they're not homogenous, right? I think younger team members, as you've heard us talk about, without being stereotypical, often come in with big questions and a healthy skepticism, right, about how things have always been done. And I actually think that that's their job. It's the job of younger generations to challenge, to reimagine, and to dream bigger because we did it. I can think of when I entered the workforce, I had lots of questions, and I thought everybody who was doing the work before me, was a little bit questionable. And so I try to lean into that, right? To say that I remember questioning and challenging and reimagining. And it is our job as folks with more experience to create space for those questions and not shut them down, right? But at the same time, we can't abandon the wisdom and the lessons learned by those of us who've been in the work for years, right? So we have to leverage those diverse perspectives and not let them pull us apart. And I think the other thing that I would add in terms of the piece of advice is that rigid policies don't hold up in intergenerational teams. So you can't be rigid, right? What one person sees as structure, another may see as bureaucracy. What feels like flexibility to one person might feel like instability, to another. So we've tried to stay adaptable, getting really clear about what needs to be consistent across the board, but also allowing room for personal preference and autonomy when we can, right? So it does take patience. I think it takes intentionality and a whole lot of humility. But when it's working, I think it's just magical because intergenerational teams don't just get the work done, but they build something that lasts.
And something that's better. Elsa, what would your piece of advice be?
Managing intergenerational teams is a powerful opportunity. It's not a problem. It might be complicated sometimes because in any space, it doesn't have to do with age, but when you're trying to be inclusive, you have to be very intentional. And it's a muscle you have to continue to develop, right? And evolve. It's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing practice with intentionality. And I think the key to leading, again, is going back to the empathy, curiosity, and flexibility. Everybody communicates in different ways. Like you have to communicate in layers. You cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach. Some people prefer face-to-face conversations. Some people prefer a quick message. While values might differ or strengths might differ, the mission always unites us, right? What does the community need, not what I need or you need? I think very important is create the space for everybody to shine, leverage the strengths across generations. I do want to emphasize at the end, it's not about managing age, it's about managing people. We have to lead with inclusion and respect, curiosity, and making sure that every figure is empowered to contribute, to share something, and to have a safe space to be able to collaborate.
Absolutely. Outstanding advice for every leader. You two have brought so many terrific ideas and certainly energized me. I'm curious, though, how you manage it all and what you each do to recharge. So our closing question that we ask everybody is, what is it that you do that enables you to get your energy back? Alex, may I start with you?
Absolutely. I love this question and it changes constantly. But I am going to say that often it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that rest has to be earned or that recharging has to be earned or that pausing means falling behind. And so for me, that's how I recharge. It's about resting, right? And it's about finding joy. So I try to recharge in ways that connect me or reconnect me to whom I am outside of my work, outside of the role of CEO. So I spend time with my family and my friends. I laugh loudly. I believe that joy is a superpower. I eat good food. I enjoy not talking about work. I go for walks. I listen to music that allows me to just shake my mind and my body and reminds me of who I am. And I journal. I'm not always consistent with the journaling, but I write to remember what I'm grateful for, what I've learned. and to honor the ancestors I'm trying to make proud. And so that journaling activity definitely grounds me, reminds me that I'm part of something bigger and that I'm not, carrying this work alone. And honestly, I recharge sometimes by just witnessing the brilliance of my team. Like, I have an incredible team, a multi-generational, interfaith, multidisciplinary in many ways team, and really hearing about, a coach having a breakthrough with a student or building a new tool that we think is going to change the game fills my cup, in a very different way. But it definitely reminds me of why we're doing this work. So rest, but also joy, connection, and then honoring my team and the legacy that I'm honored to be a part of.
Excellent. I agree with all those things. Elsa, what do you do to recharge?
I need to work a little bit more on that because as a typical nonprofit leader, sometimes we forget to take care of ourselves. We're caregivers to everyone except ourselves. I think I've been very intentional recently in just stopping and meditating at least every couple of days and being grateful. I think sometimes we go, and we forget to be grateful that we're very privileged to have shelter, to have food, to be in a space, in a job that we're passionate about. And that re-energizes you 100% and it connects you back to your purpose as a human being.
Absolutely. Elsa and Alex, thank you for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was such a joy to be in conversation with you and Elsa.